Welcome back to episode number 16 of the Zero Access Footy podcast. My name is Ruth, otherwise known as Northie AFL, and I'm joined once again by Behmmy, otherwise known as the Premiership Quarter. Let me know how you're feeling this week.
What's going on, everybody?
I did that on purpose to make sure that I didn't catch any flack for that, but let me know. How has your week been enjoying the bye?
I'm not disappointed because they could have didn't lose.
They didn't win either, but the lack of disappointment is very good this week.
It's news and it's good.
And I'm surprised I'm not so disappointed this week. But I'm very excited to have a look.
Should be.
A little look. We'll talk about it more. But 4 points is 4 points, especially this year. So, with that being said, we're going to get straight into the round 13 preview. We had the 8 games to look at this week, and we started off with a Thursday night clash at Marvel Stadium, the Dogs versus the Hawks, and I think we both got wrong this week.
We did.
So, let me know, what are your thoughts from this game?
I found it very interesting. Obviously, one of the big talking points from this game was the stuff that happened with Jack Ginnivan. And we'll sort of start with that, and then we can go into the game. But we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth later. That obviously showed the ball to the Bulldogs players after he ran from the 50 all the way through to goal. Almost missed, which would have been very ironic. But I was listening to 3AW afterwards, and they had a call up crying almost about him. Had he have missed, and like it would have been, he was genuinely mad as shit about it. He took it personal. Like he called about like if Jack Ginnivan missed, he would have been crying in the change rooms. And I'm like,
as he's crying on the call home on the train,
mate. They're AFL footballers. They do this for a living. You think if he missed, he would have been laughing about it.
I think the only criticism I had heard about it all was James Hird mentioning that his reaction would have been celebrate, absolutely, but finish the job first, right? It's the idea of celebrating too early that always gets on coaches' minds. So I think that's kind of where his criticism came from. But the game itself,
it was fun.
The game itself was more pretty much a story from the first quarter that pretty much took over the rest of the game. So quarter number 1, Dogs, I wouldn't say they collapsed, but the Hawks' pressure and tackles inside 50 was enough to really get them off to a good start. Got them basically the lead that they've held on to for the rest of the game. And that was probably the big thing. The Hawks' tackle numbers and the pressure was way higher than it has been in previous weeks.
Yeah, I found it interesting that there was no Sicily this week. And obviously he had a couple of weeks of injury that they're going to keep him out for. But found it really interesting that they went with Ramsden and Chol and Gunston up forward. They hadn't gone with 2 rucks before. And this was Chol's best game of the year. And so, obviously, giving that extra player, extra defender to go to Ramsden instead of Chol allowed him to be freed up a little bit more. And I thought it worked quite well. And then you also had a couple others. Dylan Moore had his best game of the year, 26 touches, and got involved in the game a lot more. And I think for Hawthorn, as you said, their tackle pressure and contested game was a lot better than what it had been, which allowed them to get the edge over arguably the best midfield in the comp.
Yeah, exactly. We go to Crows versus Lions next. And you mentioned in the first quarter, this game started off quite fiery, quite competitive, with a lot of tackles, a lot of these issues of players milking it, which is something we're going to get into during this episode. Yeah. But obviously the big story that came out of this one was the fact that Brisbane's inaccuracy towards the end of the game is basically what lost it for them.
Yeah, 100%. In the fourth quarter, they had 23 inside 50s, if I'm not mistaken, and kicked 8 behind to Adelaide's 5 goals.
Yeah.
Which were all in the first 8 minutes of the quarter. So Brisbane were up by 17, I believe, at 3-quarter time. And then Adelaide just came out with a bang. We've talked about it before where Brisbane can do this, and they just put 5 great minutes of football together and blow a team away. Adelaide did the exact same thing. And they capitalised. Brisbane didn't. That was a big, the way Brisbane tried to move the ball in the last quarter was great. However, that final kick inside 50, they just couldn't find anyone. They were bombing it long. They were going for the, I need to be the hero here rather than doing the team thing. And someone like Zach Bailey, who'd been a really consistent player for them, been really accurate, he just missed a lot of shots. I think he had 2 behinds and 2 out on the fulls. For a player of his quality, it's not good enough.
Clearly cost them the game, that one, and definitely should have gone Brisbane's way. We move next. Not much to say, though, for Tigers being beaten by the Swans. I've just said that this seems to be a regular situation where the Tigers are always dominated statistically. It's just that grittiness that I can constantly refer to with this team that keeps them in games. It just didn't. And Adamuze was very vocal and very honest when it came to reviewing their team's game. They said, or he had mentioned that it was probably their worst game of the year. So definitely unfortunate.
Surprising.
Swans take a game they definitely should have. Not too much to talk about.
No, listen, didn't get to watch it, and by the looks of it, I don't think it really mattered. Like, in a genuine smacking, they only won by 44. Like, in a domination, they still couldn't quite get it done to the level other teams have against Richmond. That's all you got to say about Sydney at the moment.
Yeah, and I'd say at the moment they are kind of playing like the worst team in the comp in terms of statistics and the results, but obviously there's other teams that always will take, especially this year, will always give them a run for their money. Just thank God they took their opportunities for their wins. Cats versus Suns. This one was really interesting to watch. A really, really surprising low-score affair. I bring up one moment at halftime in a halftime report with Damien Hardwick when discussing his team's game plan, because obviously finishing with 37 points for the night is nothing that you really want to ever get to, because I believe it was their lowest score since 2021. This was an interesting decision from Hardwick. He very much stuck to his guns, and the words he used were, "We are happy to play 6v7 going into our forward line." So I believe it was Max Holmes who finished the night with 40 or 41 disposals.
40 disposals, yeah.
And he was playing that extra backman, I believe. So he would be able to help navigate that back line. And Gold Coast almost put themselves at a disadvantage in the forward line to try and get their numbers in the midfield and keep it down their end, because I mentioned it in the past, and Jimmy Bartell is the person I got it from. He had mentioned it is really tough to get that ball out of the back line at GMHBA. So in a perfect world, that works out really well. But the reason it's so hard to get out of the back line isn't because you can crunch them in with less numbers. It's just purely due to ground dimensions. So I think he's gotten the tactics idea of it. He's found an idea, but I just don't think it worked. And that clearly is shown with their lack of score. I think they needed to trust the fact that they could put another number in there, needed to trust their midfield that even if they did have another number to even things out in that forward line, they could trust their really, really talented midfield to get the job done in there, to keep it in their forward half, because that's just how GMHBA works. Once it gets in there, it's really tough to get it out, but they almost relied on that too heavily to the point where they gave themselves no chances inside 50.
Something I want to talk about is something we can touch on with Melbourne as well, is taking that extra handball or that shorter kick rather than always going for the deepest target. This is something that's going to be an issue for Gold Coast, because they've got so many tools. You got Walter, Reed, or Moyle, depending who's playing, and then King as well. They're always going to try hit up those tall targets. And whilst Ben Long's been great this year, he also likes to be an aerial target, but he is the one who can lead up as well. There's no other small forward who's dangerous, right? They're relying on their midfielders to get goals. They're relying on halfback flankers like Rioli or Noble to get involved as well. You still got Swallow on the team who's provides some experience, but Ainsworth hasn't hit the ground running. Lombard is just a first-year player. Rogers is just a first-year player. Ben Ainsworth hasn't really done much, as I
don't think Jake Rogers is a first-year player, is he?
Well, second-year player, but he's
still young.
Very inexperienced. For them to be able to get past that extra number, you've either got to use your handball game, where Geelong have to send an extra player up to be able to do it if you've got an extra from the midfield, or you take that shorter kick where you're not going to the pack where chances are that's where the extra number is, where you go for a one-on-one or player on a lead. And that's something that Melbourne need to learn, because that's been an issue for them for a long time. But with a younger forward line, not necessarily relying on them to take contested marks will ease the load on them. And as first-year players and second-year players, it's really difficult. And so I think for them, that's something they need to look at a bit more.
Yeah, and I don't think the 6v7 option helps them very much either. Move to the Giants being beaten by the Power, and my God, as a Giants fan, you'd be absolutely pulling your hair out at this one. Giants actually finished with the better disposal efficiency at the end of the game, just in general.
Really?
But Power had the better inside 50 efficiency, and it's one thing I've consistently seen as the main factor to winners, is it looks like the Power backline, give them their flowers. It looks like they've held up pretty well this game. Keeping them to 50 is not easy task
Very
with
impressive.
Toby Green and
Yep.
Jesse Hogan, who I believe both played in this
They
game.
did.
So credit to Port Adelaide. It's just a game that they've been hoping. We knew that they were capable of stuff like this.
Mhm.
We saw how well Radigalia had played at times last year. And it feels like they had been missing that consistency from them this year. So good on the power. I feel like this is a really, really good jump starter. Manuka Oval, it's a home oval, but it just never seems to go well for GWS. I don't know what it is, but
Yep.
this is just, unfortunately, another situation this year where a team really squanders another opportunity.
Yeah, well, again, they've been involved in some close games. And up until this point, Port Adelaide had not won a single fourth quarter.
Yeah, insane.
And I heard this from, I think it was Hutto who was commentating the game. Can't remember exactly who, but I believe it was Hutto. And as soon as he said it, I'm like, Port Adelaide are winning this fourth quarter.
It's the commentator's curse.
It's the commentator's curse.
It's the hoodoo.
They had been finishing as a really poor team over the last entire year because they hadn't won the last quarter. They come out and do it against a team who should be winning this game and comfortably. This is a team looking to challenge for a flag compared to a team who's in the bottom four. That's a huge difference in terms of where their goals are at for these teams, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it shows the craziness of the year. I've mentioned it many a times,
100%.
but things like this seem to happen every week at the moment.
Yeah. Shout out to Bergman, Miles Bergman. He had a great game on Toby Green. He'd been wanting to get a lot more midfield minutes. Obviously, they have to sort of honour that to be able to try keep him. But 23 touches, locked down Toby Green really impressively. And I just thought he was very involved. And it's something that as a defender, it's hard to be because you're trying to lock down a player rather than get involved yourself. And I thought he showed why Port Adelaide should keep him.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, Roos beating the Eagles. I'm a very happy man. But all that being said, I've heard people say it was the worst game of the year. I didn't get to watch it, but I did have a moment as I was looking at the scores saying, oh, cool, first quarter, it seems pretty quickly. North have gotten out 20 points. I'm like, okay, this is awesome. I checked it about half an hour later, checked the scores on my phone, and it was still like 20-8 or something. This was before West Coast had kicked their goal. I'm like, oh man, my phone must be like, I must have poor data. I must have poor internet. So I kept refreshing it, checked the app again. I'm like, oh no, this is the actual score.
It was a shocking game.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
West Coast, aside from like the first 10 minutes of the first quarter and like halfway through the fourth quarter, were miles clear of you guys. However, they could not kick. It took them till their 34th inside 50 to kick a goal. That 34th inside 50 was a mark by Jack Williams, who wore number 34. And after they kicked the goal, the total combined score was 34. That's the only interesting thing that happened all game.
Fun facts with Behmmy. Look at him go.
Yeah. Numerology.
Outside of that,
Shout out Mooney.
North smashed the fourth quarter from everything I'd heard.
Yeah.
I was working at the time, so I didn't get to watch it. But
Yeah, stinker.
like I always say with the Roos, 4 points is 4 points. That's how you got to take it.
Stinkfest.
Next one, we've got ourselves Blues versus the Bombers, and this was clear domination to begin with from the Blues, and then just seems to be the consistent theme of the Blues this year. They don't know how to hold leads.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they managed to go home with the 4 points. They really needed this one, and it felt a bit strange because it really did feel like the Bombers came away with more positives to work on than the Blues did. I think for the Blues, it's just about standing strong and going to your leaders in these moments. But the more and more that these games keep coming around, it just feels like the Blues really have an identity problem. They've got so many good players. Curnow looks so different to how he has looked in his 2 previous Coleman years. He almost looks scared in the big moment, and it's not good to see from a 2-time Coleman medalist and a man you really need to be firing. Harry Mackay is always one that you look at as well. He wasn't playing this one, but this team really, really is missing. It's almost like a key factor mentally of just knowing when the tough times come, the tough blokes get going. And it feels like none of them get going when that happens.
Tough time never lasts.
Yeah, exactly. But Bombers, really, really good signs in there. I think the more I show my kind of unsatisfaction with their backline, the more they start to prove me wrong. And the Bombers looked really, really good towards their little comeback in the fourth quarter, but their inexperience had basically stopped them.
Inexperience, but also this is something we've seen from the Bombers a fair few times. Remember last week started really poor against Brisbane and then came back and almost won it late. They did this against West Coast where they were down by 3 goals late in the third quarter, but then rallied home and were able to just get over the line. It's an issue of not starting fast, and I believe the stats is 70% of the team who win the first quarter this year end up winning the game. And so that's not a successful strategy for them so far. But again, I just don't see it with Essendon. Yeah, it's great and all to be down by 36 and almost coming back and winning it, but you're down by 36. And yeah, you're really young, and there's a lot of really positive signs. I thought Lual showed some really promising signs as a winger, basically. He played this week. His tackling was great. Was able to get on the scoreboard with his first kick, first goal. But, you know, I just don't see a lot of it with Essendon, which is a bit of an issue.
We move on to a fantastic King's birthday clash. D's versus Pies. Thank God these big events seem to do really, really well. Not just in the cause, but also in the result. A 1-point win to the Pies. Thank you to Melbourne for really, really giving it to these guys.
No, not thank you to Melbourne. Get the fucking win. Get the win.
Oh, man, you sound like Stephen May, and we will talk about that little spat between him and Max Gawn. But this seems to be an interesting thing that I picked up. This is the second straight week of really, really poor inside 50 work. I think Rich had himself a decent fourth quarter, which kept them and almost gave them the win. But it's still a moment of he had a few opportunities to hand it off to someone. He tries to do it all himself. There was one that did result in a goal, but another bit of selfish play. A lot of stressed heads. And yeah, that Max Gawn moment is probably the one that's going to be talked about the most because of the result of it.
It's going to be talked about the most, but the one that should be talked about the most is when Frisch was, I think, about to kick his fourth goal. And he had Sparrow running through open.
That's who it was. That's the one I was referencing.
Yeah, that's the one you're referencing. And he played on. And instead of looking who else he could handball, he didn't realise someone was behind him. And instead of trying to handball over the top or even just kick it into Sparrow's path, he went for goal and missed. And that ended up losing them the game. Something else that ended up losing the game was Cozzy Pickett having a brain fade, not giving the ball back to Dacos. These are, Pickett's young. He's still like 23. But these are experienced players. These are premiership players. These are players who have been there and done it. He still should not be making these mistakes. That is just something simple. Gave away a goal to Dacos.
Look, I think you need to try and take positives from this one because to make the Pies really squirm like that is a fantastic result.
I thought Melbourne were the better team all day. Yeah. All day.
It's just those little moments that really decide games that they're going to be stewing a bit.
Yeah.
So unfortunate for them. But we'll move on to Macca's Man of the Week. I've been really good at keeping consistent with this, thankfully, since we really got stuck into it. But because Macca's Man of the Week, although not sponsored by McDonald's, has become a staple of the podcast, I believe. Would you agree?
No. I'm joking.
Whatever.
Of course it has.
Let's move on to one vote for this week. I am going to go with Harry Sheasel.
The Shees.
I'm going Harry Sheasel, one vote for his fantastic effort in the comeback from North Melbourne.
Just because it's against West Coast
I
doesn't
know,
take away from it?
I did think about that, but I don't give North Melbourne players very many very many votes. So I wanted to do it this week. And Harry Sheasel absolutely deserved it. Had a fantastic fourth quarter, and I thought for the fact that they did manage to pull that game out despite them being what looked to be the worst team on the day, credit to him. He seemed to lead the pack this week, and a lot of criticism that's gone his way. He managed to kind of work on that, and the score involvements, the moves inside 50, the general play, fantastic from him. Second, we go to the Neil Danaher winner. That is Josh Dacos. He managed to have himself an absolute ripper in this one. I believe he was like one of the only 35-plus disposal getters on that game. Obviously, disposals aren't everything, but big game from him. And in a game that ended up being close, he seemed to step up, which is fantastic. And then 3 votes for me felt pretty easy. I may have missed someone. Max Holmes played super important role, especially playing that kind of support back role against a really, really good forwards or a really good side in Gold Coast. Don't know about a really good forward side, but when you've got likes of Ben King in there, Jed Walter, who's always a bit dangerous, and then the occasional midfield and, like you mentioned, half-back threats. Really, really good from Max Holmes to not only help them out in that back line, but of course, command the Geelong side I feel like with Bailey Smith out, he took a step up, and that's fantastic. That's all you want from your best players. Obviously, coming off a best and fairest season, so the fact he's doing this is fantastic for him.
He's been elite all year.
Absolutely, and that is Macca's Man of the Week for round 13. So, with that being said, we've gone through our reviews. What is the main thing we want to have a look at this week? For me, it's got to be that, I've mentioned it a bit, that Max Gawn and Stephen May argument is a very, very interesting topic. So obviously the vision here, you see his immediate teammate comes to him to rile him up and let him know that it's all right. But Stephen May with a very different approach. And look, there's a part of me that's okay with the idea of being critical, but I feel like that criticism needs to come, in this sense at least, off the field. I think in the moment, he's obviously very frustrated, Stephen. And this is definitely something that can be sorted out really quickly, really easily. But you can see those two both very frustrated. Max, understandably frustrated with Stephen in this sense. I'd like to believe that this is going to be a non-issue. This is something they're going to work out together. But in the moment, it definitely is a bit strange to see, especially because Max has been such a respected captain for so long, for Stephen just to walk up and question him with a little brain fade. It's a very rare brain fade from Max Gawn, just to kick across the ground. A pretty awful kick too.
It wasn't a brain fade from Stephen May because this is what he does. I'm
Not
just
from
joking. I'm just joking.
Not from Stephen May.
For Max, like for him in that situation, he's just got to kick the ball long, and he tries to go for the top, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Obviously, May's going to be. His head's in the game, so he's thinking, mate, you've just cost us the game.
Yeah.
Chances are they weren't going to score anyway. And if they did, they were going to kick it behind and not win the game.
I don't like the instant immediate. Like, it felt immediately.
Yeah.
He went straight at him. And it's like, you can be frustrated, but that's your captain too. You got to understand, maybe he isn't looking at that, the captain label. He's being critical of a bloke who's made a mistake and trying to let him know, hey, that's just dumb.
Yeah.
And for all intents and purposes, yeah, it is a pretty bad mistake. It's a very risky kick across the ground. That's stuff that you'd learn to get rid of. But
he shanked it.
It's clear Max Gawn is very confused as to why he's coming at him in that manner. He is a very clear what, as in like, what are you talking about type deal. Yeah. So I'm interested as to what Stephen May said, because it doesn't feel like a you cost the game thing.
No, exactly.
Why would he react with a what? I feel like he would be very disappointed with himself for sure. But a what makes him feel like, what the hell are you talking about?
I think Stephen May ended up realizing that he was in the wrong. And from what we heard directly after the game, neither of them had come out and said anything to each other. I don't think so. And then Max had said that on, I think it was a Channel 7 interview, might have been Channel 9, but what he said that they're going to speak about it on the agenda to talk. But the interesting thing is, right, that was his first instinct, to go to Max.
Yeah.
And this isn't the first time Stephen May's done this. Imagine he goes for, say, Max, hey, let's go for a beer, mate. Yeah, probably not the best history there, Stephen. Probably not the best idea.
You of course needed to bring that up, didn't you?
Oh, 100%. But from Max's perspective,
maybe it's better that that argument took place on the field, because if he did something like that, everyone would say
yeah, 100%. But from Max's perspective, he's done everything right. He had a really good game. He got the 20th touch that I needed for my multi. He got that late. God. That was the kick that ended up getting it.
Gamble responsibly. Please gamble responsibly.
But he has been perfect in the media. He has been absolutely fired up on after the Simon Goodwin stuff, after the Christian Petrarca stuff, after the May and Melksham stuff, after the Clayton Olivers. Everything has fallen back onto Max. And he is the one who has stood up through it all. And now for this to happen again, I just think it sort of boiled over a little bit. But again, it's just players in the heat of the moment having an argument that they're going to get over. Yeah. It's not that big a deal, but the media are obviously going to want to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's a response and I guess an action that we wouldn't expect from two leaders of the club. Although, as I said, they're leaders of the club. They will get over this, as leaders should. They'll talk it out. They'll hash it out. Next up, we've got ourselves Adelaide's ducking problem. It seems to be a consistent thing, as Lachie Neale shows them exactly how he feels about it. But it happened a fair few times. I think the one that seems to come up the most there was it. Who was it?
Peatling.
Peatling.
Yep.
28 is Peatling, right? Or
25 is Peatling.
25. But Mark Keane's another one that when they played against North, I saw it a fair bit from him. It is a legitimate thing they seem to do. There's some instances here that aren't as bad as others, but there's some pretty bad ones here. So you see there, Peatling basically goes horizontal to try and get his head taken out.
You look at the Miller one there. He went down to pick the ball up, and instead of coming back up, he drove his head into someone else. And I think the high free kick was paid in that instance, but there are some here, like that one. That's not high at all, and the umpire gladly did not pay it. That one's high contact. I have no issue with that one. That's just, him trying to get rid of the tackle. But
that Keane one where he puts his arm up to get him high.
That's the action you see consistently. It's the shrug of the shoulder, and then it's raising the arm so that the tackle slips above the shoulders, right?
And I saw in the notes, sorry to kind of go off track,
no,
but
that's all good.
You had mentioned Kai Lohman. This is same game, other team, where an incident like that should be fined.
So
something like that?
There was an incident that I wasn't able to get the video of, but I think it was in the first quarter or the second quarter where Lohman, it was in Brisbane's forward pocket. Lohman was trying to pick up the ball. He gets bumped and contacts all shoulders, but he flings his head back, trying to get the high contact free kick. Thankfully, it wasn't paid a free kick. But you look at that, Stephen May was almost suspended for doing that in a tackle where his head never hit the ground, but he flung it back to get the free kick.
I remember that one. It was on Eddie Ford.
Right? Yep. That's the exact same thing. And when he sees Adelaide players trying to get the high contact, he's going to do it himself. Thankfully, a lot of them weren't paid this game, but there are enough that incited them to be able to continue doing it and hope that they were going to get it. There was one with Peatling where Jared Berry was tackling him. He thought it was holding the ball, but the umpire ended up paying a high free kick. And like you see him as he gets up, he literally hands the ball to Berry because he thought it was holding the ball. Like, if you don't pay them, they're not going to do it. Simple as that.
Yeah.
This is the worst thing in the game. It's not that one there. That was Zorko just ripping into him, which is completely fair. But you see Neil. Like, obviously, it's something that they consider. It's this one. That was the one where Berry almost got holding the ball for.
It just reminds me every time of when Jack Ginnivan basically couldn't.
Yep.
High contact just didn't exist for him because it kept happening. Will we see something like that for Adelaide soon? Because it feels like that Mark Keane one, especially, just the ones where you see them raise the arm to push their tackle high, is the stuff that I hope eventually gets phased out. But my problem with the idea of fining people for faking it is we get mistakes like the Ben Hobbs one. Do you remember when he got done for faking?
Yeah.
He got fined for that stuff. And then you immediately saw, no, he's not faking it. That's not a fake.
Yeah.
It becomes interpretation. And how do you argue that? Because I can guarantee you there's blokes there saying, no, that's legit, despite what they may actually do or believe. It could be an in-the-moment decision as well, right? So,
well, that's the issue. If it's an in-the-moment decision, you wipe it out. They're not going to do it in the moment.
Yeah.
Because it's not just in the moment. It's him
saying...
They
just have to get it right, and that's why I don't trust them.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. No one trusts them. And you mentioned the Hawthorn stuff. Like, this is them taking it away from Hawthorn. And it's not just raising the arm to be able to get it high. It's ducking into tackles. It's moving your head down so that it's harder for them to tackle. And this is something that's going to be interesting this week because they play Hawthorn.
Yeah.
But if they continue to pay it, they're going to continue to do it. And it's already hard to tackle. Players are so good at breaking tackles. Don't make it harder by paying these free kicks.
Fair
and
enough.
Start paying them holding the ball. If they're doing this, they can get rid of the ball.
Yeah, that's true. That's a prior
And so that's prior
I guess.
opportunity.
Yeah.
If we're doing it where they've got, which is completely separate, but if you have a one-armed pinned and you're holding the ball like this, there's no way for you to get rid of the ball. But they're paying it holding the ball. If you can get rid of the ball and you're doing this, pay it holding the ball, there'll be even less incentive for them to start doing it anymore.
Yeah. And I'd mentioned Jack Ginnivan before. He has, of course, come up. You had talked about it at the very first game. Celebrations before the goal. We gave a sneak peek as to how we thought about this stuff. Personally, I love it when stuff like this happens. Pure elation, pure personality is what this becomes. The one criticism that I had heard that makes sense from a coaching perspective is I think it was James Hurd. He had mentioned that I think it was on Footy Furnace. That was a nice little segment that I've kind of picked up and started watching regularly because I think legitimately insightful people and Tom Morris. I'm kidding. I love you, Tom. We'll see you at the Hawker sometime. But the criticism I'd heard from James Hurd funny, is that keep this type of celebration to after the goal. Get really excited after you've finished the job. And that's completely fair. As a coach, you're just like, please stop messing around with this. Please stop doing this. I want to just get the goal and win this game, get the 4 points. So I get it from a coaching perspective, but I love when players can show their flair, right?
100%.
It's just showing flair, and I think it goes with any player who were to do something like this. Goes to Willie Rioli when he was showing the ball to CJ. It's like that stuff is super cool. I like it. It's a bit of that. It's a bit of that energy that sometimes you'll need.
We don't want to see robots.
Yeah, that is true.
We don't want to see players who just kick a goal and then like, yeah. That's not what we want to see. Players enthusiastic. We want to see players celebrating the game. If they're not celebrating with fans like what they're doing here, we don't have players. We've got robots. And I think the issue is the media just want players with no personality because back then there was none. You didn't have this back in 2000s when Hers was playing. It just didn't exist. And so I think, yeah, he almost missed, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And I promise you, if he did miss, he would have been absolutely taken the mick out of.
Again, that's why I agree with the criticism of Hurd in that I would prefer it if you did it after the job was done.
I love it.
But then again, I do love it when they're doing it before the goal because it gets you pumped up. It also adds a bit of energy.
Exactly.
Realistically, they shouldn't miss that. That shouldn't be missed.
Exactly.
Enjoy it. Enjoy the stroll through with no one behind you. And just enjoy it.
Correct. The one thing I do want to mention is Bailey Smith has been applauded for all the stuff he's done, right? You look at all the social media shit he's doing, the brand sponsorship with Collingwood. This is how they get it. Yeah. Being someone other than just a footballer, right? Cody Waitman's been involved with doing graffiti and artwork and all that stuff. Embrace it. Let the AFL need to let the players do this more often. Don't confine them to just being AFL players. Obviously, the Bailey Smith had a meeting with the AFL, which was very, very interesting. But that's probably more so for saying bags for after the season rather than in the middle. But, you know.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What a wild episode we've got going on here.
Hey.
It's very woke of you, Bem. Very woke of you.
Thanks. Screw you.
Let's get on to your favourite segment and the world-renowned segment.
Yeah. World-renowned.
World-renowned. Behmy's Tribunal tasks. What have you got on the ladder today? What have you got on the agenda?
Starting with James Peatling. This is a follow-on from the Adelaide stuff. He had a sling tackle on Lachie Neale.
Funny enough, after the faking one, he's just like, yeah, stuff it. I'll show you what real looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Lachie Neale had one arm pinned as he was trying to get rid of the ball. And Peatling, clear 2 actions, in my opinion. Graded as careless, medium impact, and high contact. Completely fair. Head hit the ground. Pretty decent impact. It's not severe to the point where it was almost like 3 actions where you had the slinging and then you had the extra bit on top that would have been graded as severe impact. But I think there's an argument it could be high impact instead of just medium. The difference is he wasn't concussed.
Yeah.
We've talked about this in an extent where that's the reason it hasn't been graded
the
to
result
high
is
impact.
More important than the action.
Correct.
I still hate it.
Mm-hmm. Still always going to be hated. But I think this one could very easily be graded as 2 weak because
absolutely
he very clearly has 2 actions and his head clearly hits the ground
this
with
is
force.
Textbook for what has been tried to get stamped out of the game. This is no duty of care, basically throwing his head at the ground. This is what we've seen get punished many a time before. So
I think
there's some weeks in this one.
I've seen this graded as 3 weeks before.
Yeah, same.
And it's probably been downgraded to 2, but I feel like 3 weeks ago we weren't seeing 2 weekers or 1 weekers.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Sorry. We were only seeing 3 weekers or 1 weeks.
Yeah,
there was no in between. And now we've seen a 1 weeker that should be more and a 2 weeker that we'll talk about soon that is very interesting. That has been talked about a lot. And James Hurd was another one who's talked about this. But we'll move on to the Tom Stewart situation that was actually not graded at all. This was graded as fair bump, and I completely agree.
Yeah.
You look at it, he's gone to slap the ball. He's gotten lower, speaking about Anderson, and Stewart's stayed high. He hasn't jumped. He's hit him square in the shoulders. There is nothing wrong with this, in my opinion. This is the bump that needs to stay in the game.
The reason it's gotten so much talk is because of the result. And it's not even because, like, some people said, why are we talking about this? And it's like, this one puts you on edge. This is one of those ones where you go, what will they do? Because, again, we've seen it so many times where we're going to be broken. We're going to have to sell some merchandise, Zaf merchandise that says result greater than action, something stupid like that. Oh, that'll do numbers. But it just felt when you saw him walk off and clearly hurt, you thought, they're not gonna suspend him, are they? Surely not.
The issue is we've seen so many incidents like this where a player is slowly falling down and the player comes in, is chosen to bump, and does get him high. Tom Stewart's done one before where he jumped into Dion Prestia.
That was an awful choice. Good choice.
Correct.
This is a good choice. He went in to bump and executed it correctly. That's when I'm okay with the bump.
The only thing that was grey area was the fact that Anderson's head went straight into the ground. However, that's more so of him trying to get rid of the ball or tap the ball on as soon as Stewart came in. So there was sort of no balance for him to be able to correct how he was going to land.
Yeah.
Like his legs are almost on the ground already. So he's flinging himself towards the ball and then Stewart collects him at the same time. Interesting one, but I'm glad this one wasn't graded as a suspension. And that means we are on to the last one of the week, which is probably the one that was talked about the most, which is Sam Durham collecting Adam Chara high. If we can get onto it, Ethan, thank you very much.
This one really interested me because different perspectives have people going which way. So the one that I had wanted to bring up, Hurd has come up a lot in this episode so far, but hey, he said some interesting things. And it wasn't like him saying, oh, what a stupid decision from Chera to go in like that, but he just said the technique was wrong as to how he came in. He came head on, no movement to the ball either, didn't protect himself in any way, and got taken out by someone who was going in the correct way.
My understanding of this was that Hurd didn't want this to be a suspension at all. That he thought that because Chera didn't go in the correct way, go to the ball in the correct way, and Durham did, that somehow means this wasn't a suspension. However, and the funny thing I find is that as soon as Chera's on the ground, he just goes, fuck me. I found it so funny if you read his lips. It genuinely makes me laugh every time. But the interesting thing is, right?
That's just a genuine reaction, isn't it?
I
love that.
It's really funny.
That's good.
So this was graded as careless, high impact, and high contact, which is where the extra weight comes in to the one from James Peatling. This was obviously no duty of care because he, instead of going to pick up the ball in a correct way, he's gone to bump with his body. So I understand James Hurd saying the fact that he hasn't gone in correctly, whereas Durham has. Durham's gone in to bump. He hasn't gone in to pick the ball up. His decision was to bump. He no longer wants to pick up the ball.
Eyes, because I could argue with the ball being low, he is because his hand does get to the ball, but you could also say the action.
Chera gets there first. Durham chooses to bump. As soon as you choose to bump, if there is any high contact, you are done.
Yeah.
So yes, he will turn side on, and Chera probably should have as well. However, if he had gone from the ball, understandable, but he chose to bump. And as soon as you choose to bump, you've lost every right in saying I've gone correctly.
Yeah, okay.
So
I'm interested to see how this one goes. I think this could legitimately go either way, but I do have it swinging Durham getting suspended.
I think this could be 2 weeks, potentially 3, had Chera been concussed again, action result, yada, yada, yada. He was fine to play out the game, got a real shiner, I believe, on his cheekbone. But this one, to me, is another good decision by the MRO. And I'm thankful Greg Swan came into the AFL because this would have been arguably taken away 3 weeks ago. Very glad. I do very much disagree with James Hurd. I understand you've got to go inside on to pick up the ball, but he hasn't gone to pick up the ball. He has chosen to bump.
Fair enough. And there is Behmy's Tribunal task. A very, very solid week, I reckon. We're seeing a little bit of improvement here and there. It's just a few shaky moments, especially that Anderson result. Yep. I hope that one doesn't get a suspension. It shouldn't, realistically, but that'll really, really tell us whether it is result over action. Next, we've got ourselves a bit of a review. So 4 teams to go through. We won't try and push them out too long, but let's give some general thoughts on each team. First off, we've got ourselves the Pies. How do we feel the Pies are doing so far?
Good.
There's not too much to say.
No.
Other than a potential hiccup that they luckily avoided against Melbourne. they've had the dream start to the season. They currently sit 6 points ahead of Brisbane, who are second. They're doing really, really well just in general play. I couldn't praise them more for their Hawthorn game, and even in the close games. And they're known for being clutch killers, and they went ahead and did so again. It does feel a little bit like we're seeing the inevitability of them in a grand final, but of course things change quickly. They are the only team with only 2 losses, the only team in double-digit wins, and just overall fantastic things to look from. They've managed to win the games with players out. They've rested players when they've needed to. They now get a whole team rest for a week, so it'll be interesting to see how they come out against St Kilda in the week after their bye. The players that I want to point out are particularly the ones who are out at the moment. So, Jordan De Goey, really, really awesome player to have kind of just sitting, waiting to show up. That's a great thing for Collingwood to have, just to wait and see how he turns out.
Still Lockie Schultz as well
Lockie
as out.
Schultz, yeah.
For Collingwood, I think it's plays that had a good level in them that we've seen that I think is really important, that have taken the next step, right? Billy Frampton.
Yep.
Solid 23 to 25 level player.
Jamie Elliott has been healthy.
And so he's now locked his spot in the team. Darcy Cameron has gone from a really good ruckman to one of the best in the league.
Top tier.
So you look at those sort of plays. Braden Maynard's still going to have to come back eventually. Jeremy Howe's had arguably his best season of his entire career. As you said, Jamie Elliott has as well. Pendlebury, Sidebottom's had one of his best
Sidebottom's
years.
getting considerations for AA. I can't believe that.
It's nuts, right?
I'm not saying that in a way that he shouldn't be. I'm saying that in a way that, man, his career, you'd think he'd be whittling down, but these Collingwood boys just keep finding ways to conjure up the old people.
Yeah.
I need some of that. I need some of the juice that they're on.
Jack Darling,
not
40 goals.
insinuating anything, but I need some of the juice that they're on.
Jack Darling, 40 goals in the second half of the year.
Yeah, I hope so. Oh, God, that'd be so nice.
But players like Ned Long, Ed Allen, they're just getting opportunity and they're thriving. So, for me,
fantastic and almost perfect first half of the season.
100%. I think there's still the issue of their forwards not necessarily all clicking. Like Elliott had one of his down weeks, and they were relying on goals from a lot of plays that don't normally provide them. That's my only concern. Are their 3 keys working together? Because without Elliott doing it, it's a bit of an issue for me still.
Yep.
Which is something they can definitely recognise in the second half of the year now that they've got their bye.
Fantastic. Next up, Sydney. Not so positive, but at least going into it on a win. Do we see this team actually making a fight for finals at this point, which is crazy because,
still yes.
Sorry to do it, I'm going to take you back to your predictions at the beginning of the season. Where did you have these guys placed?
Maybe first. You had them in the top 4, didn't you?
I believe I did, but first I was even vocal then, saying first was quite crazy to me. I didn't think they'd be able to do it back to back, but then again, I didn't think they'd be 5 spots out of top 8.
Yeah.
So 13th is where they sit. They are 5 and 8. The clear thing seems to be health and players they just don't have access to. That's one of the main reasons they're losing so often.
Yeah.
I think they rely way too heavily on Heaney and Warner. Grundy, thankfully, has stepped up, but again, they're not reliant on him. I don't think him playing good games is what's going to take him over the top. But at the moment, it's definitely not as bad as it was at certain points. So their loss to Essendon was one that I thought really marked a whoa, this team is much different to what I expected. They've had good moments with their massive win over North and their really solid one over Richmond. But again, that's stuff that we thought we'd be saying about teams like, I'm looking here, Essendon, right? That was their kind of idea, 14 to 12. And while they're sitting at 10, that's great for them. I didn't think that Sydney was going to be the one to replace them. So definitely in the big picture thing, Sydney are having a really, really poor season. But there are signs they do still have the chance. Realistically, they are 4 points, 1 win away from 8th position. They have 20 points along with Melbourne, Port Adelaide, St Kilda and Carlton. So it's a big mess, I guess, down in that 11 to 15 position. But Sydney, they're going to have a lot of looks inside to see, right, where do we see our improvements? Obviously, we're excited to see our players come back. Errol Goulden will come back eventually sometime soon. Blakey had himself a career game against Richmond, and the usuals like Warner and Heaney, despite them not having 2024 campaigns are having decent campaigns nonetheless. It's just everything around them, especially their key positions, really need to get better.
Yeah, 100%. This is come at the most opportune time for them, this bye, like without a doubt. They will hopefully get a couple players back. Errol Goulden is 1 to 2 weeks away, which is really promising from them. Logan McDonald, still a long way away.
Yeah.
Papley, again, 1 to 2 weeks away. Anyone else? Not really. That's sort of it.
But those are some pretty important players.
Yeah, Goulden and Papley, if they come back for round 15, then that's huge for them because they just need to take some pressure off. We've seen that Heaney and Warner can't do everything. They can bob up here and there for great games, but they can't do it every week. And for them, they just need to get their system confirmed. Do they want to play this really fast, really engaging brand of footy that they did at times last year? Or do they want to go with a more defensively focused approach that they don't necessarily have the tools for? Because you look at McCartan, great player. You look at Rampy, still there, but Melican's not really it. Blakey's not a lockdown defender. Cunningham hasn't been available a lot of the year. They don't really have a lot of defensive tools, so they need to rely on their forwards to get the job done, but they haven't because they've only had McLean available all year.
Yeah.
Marty's been in and out. I also want them to focus on one thing. Their stupid decisions in terms of having suspensions when they don't need to, Marty doing it, and also paying 15-metre free kicks. They had 7, I think, in 2 games already this year.
They're that undisciplined.
They're that undisciplined. So that's something they need to fix.
Fair enough.
And that'll help them not get blown out by teams.
Well, the Callum Mills one where it comes back after long injury.
And
I
then
think
gets
it was.
suspended.
And then, no, it was a long suspension. And then just gets suspended again for a game. So things like that they hope to cut out of their game.
Yeah.
Suns, this has been, all things said, a great season so far.
100%.
I'm still very iffy. Realistically, they're still prone to a really, really big fall off.
Mm-hmm.
They're on 2 losses in a row going into this bye. So honestly, for them, this bye is like a thank God we can reset, find out what worked for us, and then jump back into it. Because Gold Coast, a lot of people still are excited for them, and to be excited, fantastic. To come into the bye being 5th is definitely something they should be happy with, considering they have never made finals before, but could very easily, I always will come back to that Richmond loss. They should be trying to fight for top 2 at this point. Top 2 should be where they're aiming.
Yeah.
I think that'll really make them feel safe.
Yeah, well, you look at the ladder.
You just got to be happy with top 4 if you're Gold Coast.
Correct. They're a game in hand. So you look at the top 7 teams. They're the only one that's played 12 instead of the 13. They get that extra win, which will be against Essendon. They're sitting probably, they're back into the top 4. So that game in hand is going to be a real difference for them. They should bank both wins against Essendon. But for Gold Coast, again, it's probably looking at that forward issue is my only concern. Are you relying on Ben Long to continue this in the second half of the year? Can we get Ben King back into some really good form? Because over the last few weeks, he's struggled to kick multiple goals. But again, it's those X factors that I want to see.
Jed Walter's also still a bit raw, but there's
Walter,
exciting
Reid,
things.
Correct. Are they going to go potentially smaller? Do we see 2 key forwards rather than the 3? Hardwick's been very much locked into that I want 3 key forwards, but I want to see those X factors. Bailey Humphrey, can he be unlocked even more than he already has? Because he's going to be a genuine match winner. I want to see Ben Ainsworth back into form. I'm huge on this bloke. If you get him averaging 20 touches and a goal, or even close to that, is going to be a huge reason as to why your forward issues are going to be solved. Can you get someone like... I'm trying to think. Do you want to play Noah Anderson 30% forward? See if you can get that Isaac Rankin role.
30% forward's interesting because
your
you
midfield's
could be
already
onto
solid.
something, but I'm trying to think the people who are like that are the Paddy Cripps, the Marcus Bontempellis.
They're bigger bodies.
They are bigger bodies,
But
so that's why I'm thinking, why is Noah Anderson going to be
He's
so good
192
there?
centimetres.
Yeah, I get that he's got height. Do you want to play him as a key forward?
I'm not... doesn't need to be key forward, just someone that, not rest, but ball winner.
And
someone who's
realistically, they
going
can
to win a
afford to do
contest.
that. Their rotations can allow them to do that.
You look at Flanders. He's one who has been really poor this year.
Yeah.
Can he get back into form?
That's the one I'm thinking of. Because
Yeah.
do they put him in there to get him going again? Or do they chuck Noble or even Rioli in there and let them start riding because they've had good seasons?
You know that you've got a a base and a system that's going to win you games. What can you do to elevate that to the next level is the question for Gold Coast.
Yeah, so they're going to be looking at some of their big questions for sure because they need to make finals this season. A lot of people see it happening, but they're still prone to the drop-off. Richmond, look, I think so far their season has been a success.
This is a huge success so
and
far.
while I wouldn't, we're not going to do this segment at this point, but I'd actually say they're overachieving.
Oh, big time.
I'd say they're overachieving. 3 wins.
They're over
and some really, really tight finishes against teams that people wouldn't have thought is fantastic for them. But that all being said, it's still very clear to see why they're a poor team. I've mentioned it so many times when they lose these games, they just get statistically dominated in some of these games that they lose. Sydney's the most recent one, but even the games that are close, I think of the Essendon one, they got destroyed statistically. But because they have that grit, that tenacity to keep it going, and they know they've got nothing to lose, so they continuously fight, despite them not having the ball in their hand or getting most of the efficiency down pat. They still manage to keep games close sometimes, and so imagine what they're going to be like when they all start to play smarter football.
Yeah. Not making silly mistakes
get
like
acquainted
that.
to each other a bit more. This team can be really dangerous. It's why so many people have come out and said they're doing the rebuild right. They have gone into a draft and absolutely loaded up on young talent. From what it looks like, have picked quite well. Lawler has had flashes and is playing very much like an early Dusty, is what they love to compare him to. And sure, go for it. Why not? Get your hopes up again. I think there's definite potential for that young bloke. But the likes of Luke Traynor has started to show more and more excitement as well. And so many younger ones. Seth Campbell's been fantastic for their young group. Legitimately, it was a Coleman Smokey at some point. But I think he's fallen off a little bit.
Him, Mansell, Tom Brown off of half-back.
Brown's been more and more consistent.
Yeah, like you look at Ben Miller, his progression throughout his career is very, very interesting and looks to be a really solid key defender. Campbell Gray has taken the opportunity without Noah Bolter at times. I think, just focus on the youth. Don't always rely on the likes of Taranto and Hopper. Obviously, there's a lot of injuries with their younger players, but see what you can get out of Smiley in the back half of the year. Can you get Taj Houghton to play some games in the back end of the year? They're getting the younger players experience. That's all they need to do. Their over-unders at the start of the year was 2.5 wins. They've already blown that out of the water with 3.
And we're at the halfway point. So
exactly.
Good on them. And they've gotten some big ones too.
If they can win 5 games for this year, that's a huge tick in my opinion.
Yeah, fantastic. So while a negative season for them, they have so many positives on their side.
What are our grades for each team so far? What would you give Collingwood?
Collingwood A+.
Yeah.
Sydney
D-.
D-. I wouldn't say their season's a failure yet. I'd even say a D. D- says that they're basically just
D
away from being a complete fail. But I think considering they're still a shout for finals.
And their injuries, I'll give them a D.
Yeah.
Gold Coast A.
A- for me.
Yeah.
A-. I think they're having a fantastic season, but you still have questions.
Yeah.
And the team next to them gives me the questions. I think for Richmond, this is a
B+ in my opinion.
You took the word. I wanted to be original. B+ is what I was going to give them.
You're not original, man.
B+ though, yeah. Look, for the most part, 3 positives, 1 negative in terms of season gradings. I think that's pretty good. So, with that being said, we don't need to talk about these teams anymore. Let's talk about round number 14 and our prime matchup.
Thank God we don't need to talk about Collingwood anymore.
Oh, thank God. Oh, so sick of those blokes. We've got Brisbane versus the Giants at the Gabba. This is our marquee matchup. A lot of different interesting marquee matchups this week. We could have gone the UTAS matchup. That would have been good fun.
Probably going to be a better game.
Yeah, probably, knowing us, picking the wrong teams. But we only picked the wrong team by 1 game last week, so I think we're pretty good. Giants versus the Lions. This is the team that can't seem to work out their form ever versus the team that consistently continues to surprise us. And I really feel like the Giants could take this game. It just feels like such a Giants game to win for me. They have shown many a times before that the game's expected to win. They will play down to competition. A lot of vision I was showed the lack of effort from GWS players. Like Lockie Whitfield in moments during the game against Port Adelaide would give half-assed efforts to keep up with his opponent and keep within marking distance of his opponent and just allow the pressure to back off a bit. But when they play teams like this, like the Lions, who are contending for a premiership this season, they almost go, all right, it's time to really kick in. This is the time where we need to start working hard. And God, would they want to really make up for their poor performance against them last time? Realistically, I think that's something we overlooked. The fact that the last time these two played, they haven't played it yet this year, have they? I don't think so. Last time these two played was the game that sparked Brisbane's run to the premiership.
Was it?
The final. Last year.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The semi-final, I believe it was, where Giants had the big lead and the Lions...
44 points, and then Joe Danaher kicks too late.
So that makes you think, does that give them a bit of extra motivation? Obviously, they shouldn't need motivation against a team like this. They should be a team that looks to really keep their season in the safety without having to worry about trying to pull off miraculous wins towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is, like I said, it's a Giants game to win. The last game they played against Port was a Giants game to lose. Like, the game, it's at Macca, which I'm like, of course they're going to lose that one. For some reason, they play awful there. But this one, it's away. It's at the Gabba. The Lions have been a bit vulnerable at the Gabba. The big loss to Collingwood and I believe the loss to Melbourne.
Yep.
So there's opportunities for the Giants to take this. And I think they will. I think they're going to take it. They're going to win by 18 points.
I'm very intrigued by this game. And
no, I didn't say a single thing about matchups there. This is completely off a vibe this week.
I've talked about this before with GWS and that they've gone really tall recently. Like they've got Buckley, Taylor, Himmelberg, Leah, and Connor Iden all in their backline. I don't think that suits their game style. However, they want to keep Lee in the team to be able to keep him because he's going to be super talent.
Yep.
However, I just think that comparing that to the Lions forward line, you got Hipwood and Morris. I can't remember his name, but they had a academy player come in. They've had Sam Day come in at times. But they're a very small forward-dominated team. Yeah. Loman, one of the Ashcrofts, often plays in there.
Loman's been a bit poor this season, to be fair.
Yeah, he has. But Bailey, Rayner, like their best forwards are smalls right now. That's probably the edge that gives it to Brisbane, in my opinion. So I do have Brisbane winning this. But midfield battle going to be interesting because it was James Madden, the ruck for GWS. There was no Kieran Briggs. I don't think he's back this week either. But there's also no McInerney at the moment. He's been
Darcy
out.
Fort matchup. So, this is going to be a ruck matchup for the ages. Yep. I can't wait for this one.
That sort of cancels that very much cancels each other out. And both teams coming off a loss. I think you look at the ball delivery that we've seen from Brisbane last week, and very similar from GWS, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting. I want to see Keaton Coleman back because I think that's what they need, someone who can hit a target. But I also want to see Tom Doedee in the team because I think they can unleash him this week. I don't believe he's injured, and I really think his intercepting game will help Harris Andrews because Jack Payne's been great, but I think Ryan Lester's been a bit iffy this year. And Answorth has done a great job in terms of Starcevic, but he comes back this week from what I've read. So I think Lions are only getting better, whereas GWS aren't really improving at the moment. See, going Brisbane's way, and I don't think it's going to be that close. I think I'm probably leaning towards a 6 or 7 goal margin. I just don't see it with GWS at the moment.
Yeah.
To watch them come out and win.
I'm telling you, bro, it is based off. I'm going purely off of vibes this week. There's been so many weeks that I've gone with you. I always go with you when it comes to St Kilda because for some reason you have the playbook for St Kilda games.
You know, aside from the last 4 weeks where I've tipped us wrong.
Yeah, good one, mate. But this game, purely off of vibes, this is such a GWS win. I feel it. Man. Mm-hmm. We're going to look at the whole preview, though. No. Saints versus Dogs. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this game? I'm not going to copy.
You just came out and said, I've copied.
Shut up. Say the game.
No.
You're not winning?
Oh, definitely not. Oh, we're getting absolutely bad. Last time we played them, we got battered by like 70. And like I
Think it's going
tipped
to happen
us
again?
probably. I mean, Trelaw's
It's not going to be a NAS legacy game?
very well could be, and we'd still lose by 80. Honestly, I believe they get Sam Darcy back, so I'm not looking forward to
Do
it.
they actually?
I think so.
Oh, no.
After him getting injured against us, which is great. We won't get Philippou back. So, yeah, that bridge is looking very comfortable right now.
Dogs by 60. Dogs by 60. Yeah.
I'm tipping Dogs by 59.
Fair enough.
Our midfields are going to get absolutely dominated. Like, unless we bring in Wintager, McRae, and Steele as our three midfielders and just tag all of their midfielders, we're not going to win. Genuinely.
So you're saying that Tim English is going to win the ruck contest, but every single time a
It's just
Sydney
gonna be
player is
tackled.
going to be there. Sorry, Sydney. St Kilda player is going to be there to go bang and just tackle him straight away. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, Bont.
Yeah.
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, basically.
Fantastic. What a game plan.
Unless Jack Higgins kicks like 10, which he never plays well against the Bulldogs, which isn't going to happen. Unless Cooper Sharman has like the greatest game of all time. Unless Liam Henry comes in and has the greatest. We're not going to win, if you couldn't tell. Dogs by 59, as I said.
Friday night at UTAS.
What are you going?
I already told you.
Dogs by 60. Yeah.
UTAS, Friday night, Hawks versus Crows. This is the
Hawkball.
one we thought could be the big one of the week
Game
as
of the
well.
week. Yeah.
But because Tasmania, you're already having it rough as it is.
Yeah.
We excluded them from our game of the week. But that
You
being said,
excluded them.
shut up.
You hate that place.
No, I actually love Tasmania as a place. It's fantastic. I just like making fun of them sometimes. It's just part of the
Shut
cool.
up.
I'm a North Melbourne fan. I'm going to take it anyways. Hawks versus Crows. This one is a Hawthorn team that's coming off of a win they desperately needed. So finding a little bit of form, things to work off of, things that seem to work. Versus a Crows side that got very, very lucky last week. So definitely counting their blessings.
They did get lucky, but at the same time, they also kicked like 7 behinds to start the game.
Yeah.
So Brisbane had that, but so did Adelaide.
Yeah, so it did even itself out. But at the same time, you shouldn't be relying on an awful finishing performance from Brisbane to get you over the line. Really shouldn't have happened. Hawks taking on this Crows side. I reckon it's going to be Hawks that take this one. They do play pretty well at this venue.
They're very good down in Tassie.
Yeah, they know how to play this one. And Crows, look, I think their general the way they play at Adelaide Oval would probably translate pretty well to this game and to this ground. But Hawks showed the signs that they're back to where they usually are, seem to be figuring some things out here and there that are working really well for them. And Crows, they've been playing good football. They just need to play their regular game and they'll make it close.
Yeah.
But I don't think their regular game is what's going to take them over the line, really. So I'm going Hawks by, I hope it's a close one, 4 points.
Fair enough. I think I agree with Hawthorn winning this. I just think not a great week for them to really travel down after a tough win against Brisbane. But they are battle tested now. We've seen this from Adelaide over the last couple of weeks, some really good wins. But again, I just think Hawthorn down in Tassie is a really difficult game to go and win. I don't think anyone's done it over the last year as well. I think they're undefeated off the top of my head in
Well,
Tassie.
the last time I think that they played at UTAS, it was the Giants-Hawks game that was basically determined by the scoring end. At least in the first half. And then the Hawks blew away.
Yeah.
That was a crazy game to watch because I'm pretty sure they almost scored the exact same score compared to each other first and second quarter.
Yes.
Going the scoring end. It just showed how valuable it was kicking with the wind that game. But
yeah. No James Sicily, and that means Hawthorn win.
I was going to say, is that a negative?
I'll go Hawks by 11. I
Fair
just
enough.
think that it'll probably be about 30-ish by the midway through the fourth, and then Adelaide kick a couple goals.
Beauty.
What's
Saturday.
yours?
What's this?
What's your
Hawks by
margin?
4. Hawks by 4.
Close game. Would love that.
Saturday, twilight at the MCG. We've got Bombers versus Cats.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the inexperience of the Bombers, although they're showing the signs, and I think the team that's perfect to counter that is Geelong, unfortunately, for them. They just have, not only have they got experience, they've got fantastic talent around the ground that outmatches Bombers. Matchups out the wazoo for these guys. These guys are going to have a really, really good time with the matchup-wise. Sam DeConing on Peter Wright, I'd imagine, is going to be an interesting matchup for sure. What's funny?
Because it's Peter Wright in 2025.
Yeah, I guess so. But, like, he showed signs in that game against
Yeah,
Carlton.
he wasn't too bad. I'm just taking
I think it would be a good matchup. And then,
Yeah.
I talk about the small rise from the Bombers' backline. I think I was a bit critical when I had mentioned that often with Brad Scott teams, as I'd know, they love to just bomb it out. They love to just try and get as much space. And I think the only one that I really saw do that against Carlton was Jaden Laverty. He's the only one that I saw that really didn't put much thought into his kick. He'd keep the chain going if there was a kick across, but if there was no chain reaction, he'd just go long. And he's the only one that I saw do that. Nick Martin has consistently showed why he's a fantastic young bloke for their team. But again, that's talking more moments and small things from inexperienced players. The Cats can do this consistently. And if that hamstring problem is just a one-off week for Bailey Smith, the midfield's going to have so much fun for the Cats.
I see the Cats smoking them, I think probably by 8 goals.
It could happen. It definitely could happen.
I either see them winning by 4 goals or 8 goals. That's where I see it.
Decent.
I just think you look at the Bombers. They played a Brisbane team that's not in the best of form at the moment, and then almost got over the line but didn't. Played a Carlton team that's been absolutely dog shit, and almost got over the line again. This is a Geelong team that don't always give these sort of teams a chance.
They need to play up this week, and they've had times they've done it.
Yeah,
I think that Brisbane one is a time where they've played up to their competition, but that Cats team, I think just matchup wise, like even if they came up against Collingwood, I think the Bombers would have a decent chance because the Pies are still have their moments of inexperience and moments and matchups even sometimes at their worst this year.
Yeah,
and their worst hasn't been that bad. It's been pretty good. Their matchups, Collingwood compared to Bombers, haven't been too lopsided, but against the Cats, I feel like the back line is strong enough for them to stop Essendon's forward line. When we go to Essendon's back line, it's still fairly inexperienced and can get rushed.
Geelong is smart enough to the point where they'll tag Martin or they'll tag Merritt. Carlton didn't, and that's what gave Essendon a chance.
Yeah.
I see Bombers getting pantsed. And
how much?
I went 48. What are you going?
I'm going to go Cats by 36.
I had in here you were going to go back Cats by 35.
Nope, not quite.
So close.
Then we go to Saturday night at Optus Stadium.
Your team.
Technically a home game, but this is the first of the games that they had sold.
Second of the game.
Second one?
Yeah, you sold last week against West Coast.
Oh, that was one we had sold. Okay,
yes.
Fair enough.
It's in Bunbury.
Yeah, I thought it was just a one-off game in Bunbury. Fair enough. Saturday night at Optus Stadium, Roos versus Dockers. Now, this one, is the second one of the games that the Roos have sold to WA. I hope we make it close, but Dockers are in some half-decent form. The only hope is they come out a bit sluggish off of the bye. Yep. That is the only hope that I see for the Roos. The good thing is the Roos in their last 5 are 2 wins, a draw, and 2 losses. Without looking too far into it, it's fantastic last 5 games.
You mentioned that the Dockers could very well come out snoozy after the bye.
Yeah.
That's a Dockers thing to do. You're going to hate me for this.
What are you saying?
North Melbourne. By 9 points. What is happening?
Keep going.
Are going.
Say it. Say it. Say it. What are they going to do? Yes.
Jesus Christ.
I would be really happy if the Roos managed to take this one. But as I usually do, I don't have much. I don't know why they're laughing so much. I don't have much faith in the Dockers. In the Roos in any game. So I'm going to say Dockers take this one by 30, despite a snoozy first half.
I'm
man,
lost.
That's awesome. I'm glad you guys enjoyed that. Sunday Arvo at Adelaide Oval. 2 teams that are in some pretty decent. Really?
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Port versus D's.
Ugh.
2 teams that are coming off some pretty decent games. One a win against a top 8 side, and one against number 1 in the competition, nearly pipping them. That's a pretty good matchup, I'd say.
Yeah, but it's a shit team versus a team that can't kick. So,
So you think it's just going to look like the NAB Aus kick halftime game? You think it's going to be that for the entire day?
Honestly, yeah. Sunday Arvo, dog shit game, Port D's. Let's go Port by 11. I genuinely could not care less who wins this game, so long as they go above St Kilda in the end. That's all I care about.
You really want a good draft pick.
Yep.
I'm going to say Port Adelaide take this one. Showed a lot of fight last week. So I'm going to say Port take this one by 22.
22, my favourite number.
Eagles versus Blues to finish it off. If you're talking about awful games, I feel like this one could be up there.
This is
Sunday
the definition
looks
of a
to
snooze
be
fest.
one of the worst days of the AFL season.
Yeah. Blues by, they normally torch them, but I'll go Blues by 41. Again, stays close, and then they torch them late.
I'm going to say a draw.
Yeah. You know what?
God, how funny would that be?
If there's a draw this week, it's Power Days.
Yeah, it could be, but it's like the final score is 8 goals, 9 by Port to 7
6
goals.
goals, 6 goals, 21.
21.
They've done it before.
I'm waiting for it. That could be funny. But yeah, Eagles, Blues, I'm going to say a draw.
Kerno could kick 5.
God, how embarrassing would it be if the Blues lose to Richmond and the Eagles in one season?
And they play you guys
season.
again, so imagine they lose to you guys.
No, they won't. They seem to always bump us. It's annoying. Maybe it could be a super clash thing, which I'd hate if that's the case. I really want a big game. I really want North to have at least one big game.
Yeah, no.
But that's all we're going to go with. Of course, the buys. We don't need to talk about that. Thank you guys again for tuning in to another episode of Zero Access Footy. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I appreciate you once again. And thank you once again, Behm, for jumping into the podcast with me. I sound really deflated for some reason. Like it was almost hard to work with you. You're a fantastic bloke. I'd just like to let you know that.
I'm not going to let you hit, mate.
No, that's not what I meant. Just trying to be a nice bloke. But if you enjoyed what you heard here today, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Be sure to follow us on our social medias, Instagram, TikTok, and of course on Spotify as well. If you are an audio listener and don't care about the visuals, be sure to check us out there and rate us 5 stars. Also, why have they not changed? Producer Ethan is really poor today. Really, really poor. And you saw there, Amazon Music.
He had his good week last week. He's now taking his dip in form.
I know. This is awful stuff from him. He's in his bye week,
we might have to drop him.
Yeah, he's some poor form. Put him in the 2s this week. Put him in Real and Raw.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you all in the next one. Catch you later.
Not bad enough.
Did you like that? How good was that ending, bro? That was so good.